The focus of today's video is the topic of relationships as spiritual practice. We all are in relationships in some form or another. And extending our practice to our relationships widely increases our practice ground. In Tantric Buddhism, they have understood and taught for a very long time that you cannot exclusively practice on the cushion. You cannot make meditation something you do for a fixed period of time during your day. The mindset, the attitude towards life has to be carried from your exclusively inward-focused meditation sessions into those everyday life experiences. And because intimate relationships are such a big part of our lives, there are specific recommendations around intimate relationships and how to deal with them in order to actually make them a spiritual practice, to make them have the ability to teach us deep insights about ourselves and the world in a spiritual way. So a few recommendations here, something I learned from myself, something I have been learning from others. So this is really something very practical. I think you can take home a few interesting points and you can try them out immediately. It doesn't take like hours of practice in order to get this down. This is just a mindset, and this is really the most important thing with these practices that you do in life. This is the one thing that you really, you could say, have to practice, and that is to have it in focus, to remember that this is what you want to do. You have to remember that you want your relationships to be your spiritual practice and not forget about it for most of your day, for most of your interactions. And you could say, if there is something to practice, then it is this part, to just remember. And it can be very helpful to think of certain cues, certain things that happen in your day regularly, that you connect them in your mind to, when this happens, I want to practice. It could be your partner coming home from work, or you are coming home to your partner. This very regular, reoccurring event that could be connected to something you do every day, you can let that be your reminder of, just as when you sit down on your cushion to meditate, it's like, this is practice ground. Not exclusively, of course, it's also about other things, it's also about other contents of your relationships, but it can also be spiritual practice. And one thing that I can really guarantee is, once you have firmly fixed in your mind the idea that your relationships are there to help you grow, then they will go much better. You will have much better relationships, and other people will feel that. They will feel a certain kind of transformation in yourself. They will feel that you are acting differently. And when we practice, or when we are looking for spiritual development in ourselves from relationships, the one key aspect that we have to bring to our relationships is honesty. Honesty and openness of our own inner world in relation to the other person. And distinguishing clearly our projections of what the other person is doing, and saying, the other person is causing this or that in myself, distinguishing that projection from what is actually going on inside ourselves. So that when we have clearly seen that distinction, that we then can say, okay, there's something inside of me that I have to work on. Because it seems to be triggered by the other person in a positive or in a negative way. You can even get attached to positive things that other people invoke in you, and why you crave their company. It's not inherently bad, but you can, with honesty and openness, while you are able to distinguish what the other person is doing and what it causes in you, you can actually go to the source and work with your inner feelings, which is where this work has to be done. So the prerequisite for spirituality in relationships is that you are radically honest and open with yourself and the way you express yourself. What that means is that you are always speaking the truth. There's no place for lying in relationships that you want to be your spiritual practice. Lying to another person makes you blind to that which you really have to face if you want to grow. It makes you blind to your own inner world that's through that lie you're avoiding to face. That's the hard part of the practice. But it makes it easy to remember at the same time. Because this honesty and truthfulness will reveal the things you will have to look at, that will really grow you, that you will have to work on. And it, in subtle and always interesting, very detailed ways, it will give you great insight about how you construct conceptualizations, stories in your mind on the basis of what you feel. In relationships, feeling are really one of the most subtle starting grounds of all of the interactions that are going on. Even though we may think that it's more about the content of what we are saying, most of the time they are grounded in what we want to feel or what we don't want to feel, or what we want to see and what we don't want to see in ourselves or the other person, and also including what we believe about the relationship, what we think this relationship that you are dealing with should be about. And then you behave in certain ways to accommodate that feeling and keep it the way it is, or change it if it's not the way you think it should be. So the insights, the spiritual insights that grow you the most, when you are really aware to your inner feelings in regards or in the context of relationships, are those very subtle motivations that drive your behavior. And identifying that, being receptive to that, that is where the juice of this practice lies. You see, there is always in relationships the potential for conflict. But when you approach it from the spiritual point of view, you immediately become aware. Once you're familiar with it, you become aware of what the root cause of conflict is. And once you are aware of that root cause, you can eliminate it. That's really beautiful. It's the connection between what you feel but don't want to feel and the story you spin around that feeling. So you might be in an interaction in a relationship. Somebody just tells you something. Could be anything. The content doesn't matter. You have to be aware what that triggers in you, what kind of feelings are provoked. And then your mind immediately makes the connection that what the other person said, that it was in the action of the other person, that it is the other person's fault for you to feel the way you feel. Your mind tells you that it's really the other person that is causing you the discomfort within yourself. And that is the root cause, the root confusion that you have to see through here and take full responsibility for your own feelings. Because when you observe it really honestly in yourself, you cannot make out any connection between what you resist within yourself and what any other person tells you or does to you in your life. There is no connection outside of concept. Your mind tells you it is okay to behave in a certain way because you didn't like what you felt, and therefore saying something to protect yourself from that feeling. That is a completely backwards approach. But we do it all the time anyways. It's like the belief, oh, I don't like to feel what I'm feeling right now, and I want it to go away. And because I see the reason for that in the other person, in the outside world, it must be the right approach to set that right in the outside world. And then this feeling will no longer bother me. And in long-term relationships, if this root cause isn't fixed, the same problems occur over and over again, just because the ones in the relationship weren't able to deal with the root cause and are always projecting the cause outwards, looking for outward fixes, looking for debates, for being right, for teaching the other one the right way of seeing things, and that is never going to work, because that feeling that you don't like has some completely different reason for being there. It is in the resistance towards the feeling, and secondly, in not being completely conscious of it. If you become conscious of the feeling itself, and you have no resistance towards it, you just give it the conscious space, the openness for it to flow through emptiness and dissolve back into emptiness, because that's your true nature. But as long as you're not connected to that and you're in your mental stories, you can resist it and it becomes painful. And you will never really see all of these details in the ways in which you resist certain things when you practice this awareness only in silent meditation. And you will have a hard time translating the insights you have in meditation into your daily life when you are not having a practice grounded in those experiences when they happen, like instantly. Because on the cushion you have other challenges that you are facing, you have other things. While they are still great and give you great benefit and insight, they are not going to easily translate 100% onto other life circumstances and experiences. So you have to experience your resistances to certain inner states while they are happening. You have to experience those consciously. And the only way to do that is through this all-day practice, and in this specific case, in interactions with other people, whether that's your intimate relationship or with co-workers or with friends, family. It doesn't really matter. You can practice this in any relationship. You only have to remember being truthful, honest, and open. We have discussed what it means to be honest. We have seen now that like you have to be brutally honest with your own inner states, and seeing that there is no connection between what the other person actually is saying or doing and how you are able to deal with your inner feelings, because the story will always be a little bit different, but the problem you have with your own inner states will always be the same if you are not correcting them. So this inner conflict will cause seemingly outside conflicts over and over again if they are not fixed. So you have to be honest with that. Truthfulness comes from that honesty. In speaking and that is really the practice here, where it expresses itself as a practice, is speaking this inner truth that you discovered through being honest about what is actually going on. You are saying, maybe in an interaction, oh damn, I have a really hard time right now with some inner state of mine. I'm confused. I'm feeling maybe a little bit anger. I don't really know how to put this into words. Something like this. It could go like this. You don't really have to be the best in expressing that, but it's just not taking that step of translating that problem that you have with your inner experience and projecting it outward onto the other person. You have to take responsibility for that, and then the other person will not feel triggered, because you are not like accusing them of something that they supposedly have said wrong and done to you. It's like more of saying, I have a problem here inside of myself that I'm trying to fix right now. I'm seeing it's coming, it happens when you do this or that, but I don't really know how to deal with this right now. I have to consciously experience this and let it go through, figure this out, and then we can discuss the matter on different grounds. Something like this. This is could be like one way to respond in like difficult situations, to appropriately honor your inner feelings and speak the truth. Because defending some thought that tells you, if you speak this thought out loud, it will protect you from whatever you don't like inside yourself. That is never going to work. There is no connection. It's a false belief that we have. And you don't have to believe this. Just experience it yourself over and over again. When you're conscious of what is happening in your emotional inner self, in relationships, you will come to that same conclusion. And then openness. Openness is slightly different from honesty or truthfulness. It means, in that case of relationships, being open to not knowing what this relationship will develop into, to not knowing the outcome, because we don't know it, but we always think we want to influence it, we want it to go our way, we want it to go a certain way, we want to be certain about the future, and we have a hard time accepting that we never know the future. So openness means being open that way, that whatever may happen can happen, based on you speaking the truth and being honest about your inner state to yourself and the other person, so that whatever comes from speaking your truth, you're open to that. But then also letting the people in your relationships in, letting them see your inner world, not in inappropriate ways. Of course, in work relationships, you are not, when you are discussing really logical facts or something about clients' work, or it's inappropriate, of course, to like take this to the emotional level. There, the practice is to just be aware of it yourself, and even though the discussion may seem to be on a very fact-based level, oftentimes it's not, because people want to defend their opinion. Once they said something, it's seemingly an expression of them, and when you say something against it, it feels like, or they feel attacked. So being aware of all of that and how it at the same time happens in yourself, that is the practice in non-intimate relationships, for example. And you only speak of probably of like emotional states in those circumstances rarely, because sometimes they are not appropriate. But in intimate relationships especially, you want to be completely open about your inner state. Otherwise, the intimate relationship really lacks the depth. There can be no connection based on facts. You have to let the other person in on what is going on inside yourself. And then the other person can really be either on the same path, be on the same developmental, or have the same interest to develop themselves and to have these insights. But even if they don't, and maybe not to the same extent as you, they can reflect back to you how they perceive the situation inside of themselves, because you have allowed yourself to be open and to open up, and that allows the other person to do the same, which can have a really beautiful dynamic, because you will discover that actually the problem or the discussions usually and the arguments you may have are rooted in something else than something in the outside world, which is usually discussed. And then there is the distinction between people who are actively closed and actively open. And really this practice, if you are faced with someone who is really closed, as a general approach to their life, and many people are, then you will have a difficult time with this practice. And you will notice this after several times when maybe you have opened up without forcing any interpretation or worldview onto the other person. You may come to the conclusion that this relationship is not to your benefit. And so the logical result would be to say, I have to get out of this relationship. It's not going to work in the long run. It's not going to be my spiritual practice ground. So I will look for people who are more open. They don't have to be specifically spiritual. But openness is an attitude towards life. And openness manifests as the willingness to change what you believe. Openness is the willingness to embrace new information and not overly defend certain views just for the sake of it. And this is of course a spectrum. Like from close to openness, there is people are always somewhere on that spectrum. And you can also be too open, where anything new you hear, you are not really able to integrate and reflect upon what you know. You just adopt without serious contemplation. So that would be way too open, and kind of the danger there is to adopt any kind of quack theory, what you believe in, and change your beliefs constantly, not being grounded in your experience. But then on the other end of the spectrum, and that is really where this practice can be difficult, is when you are completely closed, or your partner is mostly closed. Like, nobody's completely closed, but the typical reaction of a closed person in a relationship is to, whenever conflict arises, whenever something uncomfortable happens, is to not look for a way to grow out of this, but the habitual reaction will be to somehow retract back into safe behavior, into something that you have experienced previously. That can be even very childish behavior, very unreflected, very fear-based reaction, very insecure behavior, so that you are protected from whatever you do not know, because you, in order to transcend certain difficult situations and grow from challenges, you have to embrace the openness. You have to say, I don't know what I will learn from this. I don't know which person I will be when I'm through this. And so close people shy all of that, and they don't want to be open. They want to have this, they have this fear-based attachment to knowing what things will be like. And it is not very practical. It is not very helpful in order to develop yourself as a person throughout your life. If you feel you're kind of a closed person, then it would be the first aspect to work on. To open your mind, to see challenges as something that can grow you, and not every time something challenging happens, you go back to what you safely know, and you act out behavior that feels very safe to you. So that is one of the things you can look out for if the relationship you're in can work as a practice ground for spirituality. I hope this gave you good insight for this kind of tantric practice in relationships. The only thing you have to do is to remember that this is the thing you want to do, not forgetting that you want to practice in daily life and make intimate relationships, especially, your practice ground for spirituality. And then once you have really that in, and you say, this is as important as my meditation sessions, where I sit down to meditate and go inwards, then you can say, based on the 3 principles of truthfulness, honesty, and openness, I'm going to practice within the context of my relationships. Being honest means being really intimate with your inner experience, not explaining them away and like immediately projecting the cause outwards onto the other person, but saying, I'm going to honestly look at what is going on inside of myself, take responsibility for that, acting truthful from that insight, speaking that truth, and being open to the results that may come from that behavior. Not wanting a certain outcome, not wanting the other person to believe what I believe, and then I'm back in my old way of seeing things and safe and everything like that. And really the thing to look out for when you honestly investigate your inner experience is to look for the disconnect between what you feel on the inside and what happened on the outside. To really see, wow, there is no real connection. Only the mind in concept makes the connection that the other person is the cause of whatever is going on inside yourself. because you have not taken responsibility for that. That is this practice of, or let's say it's one aspect of how you can practice within the context of relationships, whether that's at work or in intimate relationships or with friends, family. You can practice in all of those areas. I hope you liked it, you got something out of it. I would really enjoy it if you gave the video a thumbs up and maybe share it with someone who you think could benefit of this, maybe your partner, and you want to practice this together, so share it with him or with her. And with that, thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Goodbye.